A priest had just entered into heaven, and greeted by St. Peter, he took him to the place where he would have his eternal dwelling. And when he got there, it was just a small shack. And the priest couldn't hide his disappointment. And he said, "Why this shack?" And then he looked up and he saw that they were giving a taxi cab driver a beautiful mansion, and with gardens and pools and all kinds of things. And he said, "Why is that cabbie getting that mansion and I'm only getting this shack?" And St. Peter said, "Well, the answer is very simple." He said, "When you preached, everybody slept. When the cab driver drove, everybody prayed." The readings today speak to us about dying, about eternal life individually, and about the end of the world. And it's pretty disturbing in a way to listen to the gospel and to listen to the readings. Prophet Malachi reminds the people that the day of the Lord is coming. And when that day comes, as kind of punishment, he speaks of a blazing fire like an oven that would destroy all the wicked. But the same fire will be for those who are faithful to God, bringing them warmth and grace and healing. And then St. Paul reminds us that we have to continue doing what we do every day. They believed that the second coming of Christ was going to happen in their lifetime. And so what a lot of them did was they quit working because they thought, well, the end's coming, why do we have to work? And St. Paul is saying, no, you're as a Christian faithful, you have to fulfill your responsibilities to God and to your neighbor, and so you have to work. And in the gospel, Jesus gets very direct about the end of the world. It will come. We don't like to hear about that. There's a pastor who, speaking on this gospel, said to the congregation very strongly, every member of this parish is going to die. He was emphasizing that it will come to all of us. And he looked out, and when he said that, there was a man in 3 or 4 rows in front of him who was smiling. And he said it again, every member of this parish is going to die. And the man kept smiling. Well, the priest couldn't take it anymore. He said, "Sir, everyone's very somber by what I just said. You're smiling, why?" He said, "Father, because I'm not a member of this parish." We look for all kinds of loopholes, don't we, to get around things that we don't want to face. And the Lord's telling us that the day will come for us individually and as a community of people. In 1998, there was a movie, it was called Dark something, I can't remember the title now. But what it was about was that there was a comet on its way direct to hit the Earth coming from space. And they predicted it would come within a year. And the President of the United States warned the people this was coming and that they were doing everything possible to try to divert the comet. But he said, what you need to do now is keep doing what you're doing. Go to school every day, go to work every day, care for your families and your friends, love God and love your neighbor. We're called to live. We're called to live. And we must not live in fear. And it was a good message. It was not a movie about heroes rescuing, but this was something where they knew that the comet would completely destroy all life on the earth. And so the question was, what should we do? If we knew that was going to happen, what should we do? And I think the message from the scriptures is very simple, that we are to do what we're called to do, what we do every day. If it's for the love of God and the love of others, that's what we need to do. Jesus says, no matter what happens, not a hair of your head will be lost. If you persevere, you will secure your lives. So we persevere through difficulties. We persevere through sufferings. We persevere through wars and all kinds of things. But if we persevere as Christians, loving God and our neighbor, that's what it's about. And how do we do that? Remember the prophet Malachi. The prophet Micah. They were asking the same questions. Lord, what do we need to do to stay right with God? And the answer that Micah gave was, Do the right, love goodness, and walk humbly with your God. Do the right, love goodness, and walk humbly with your God. It's the best advice we could get from the scriptures. We know what is good. We know what is right. If we walk humbly with God, we realize that He's in control. We submit our lives to Him in whatever we do. Remember in Matthew's Gospel, the Last Judgment, where everybody's assembled before the throne of God, and He separates them into two groups, the sheep and the goats. And then He says, when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was homeless, you sheltered me. And the people said, well, Lord, when did we do all that to you? And He said, whenever you did it to the least of my brothers, you did it for me. This past week, we celebrated the feast of St. Martin of Tours, a very saintly bishop of Tours in France. Before he even entered into the catechumenate to become a Christian, he was riding his horse, he was a soldier, and he came across a poor beggar laying in the street who was hungry and very cold and half naked. And he took his sword and he cut his own cloak in half and he gave it to the beggar. That night, Martin had a dream, and in the dream, Christ appeared to him, and he was wearing that half cloak that he gave to the beggar. For Martin, that gospel became very real. Whatever you do to another, you do to me. And so whenever we have opportunities to do something good for another, we do it to Christ. That's how we will find ourselves in His kingdom. Today, our Hunger Center directors are all outside my garage collecting monetary donations and food for us to give at Thanksgiving time. We're looking to feed 300 families Thanksgiving dinner. And anybody that can contribute, it's an opportunity. If it's $1 or whatever it might be, or a can of vegetables, they'll be here after Mass and before the next Mass and after the next Mass. We all need to contribute. Whatever we do to another, we do to Christ. And here's a perfect opportunity right in our parish now to do just that. So we come here before the Lord and we ask Him to help us to know what is right, to love goodness, and to walk humbly with our God. A blank moment. Hate when that happens. So anyway, we're about to end this liturgical year. In 2 weeks, we'll celebrate the Feast of Christ the King. And the question is, am I closer to Jesus this year than I was in the beginning of Advent? And that's a question for all of us to ask. We go through the whole liturgical year meditating on the life of Jesus, listening to the gospel, and He gives us all the wisdom that we need in order to live according to God's will. And so as we prepare to celebrate the Feast of Christ the King, we ask, is He totally King of my heart? And if He is, then we will carry out what the scriptures are telling us today, to do whatever good we can out of love for God and love for one another. And then Christ is our King.